Hey everyone. Today, we're going to dig into the hidden economic engine that's running behind, well, pretty much every decision we make. We're talking about what cereal you buy, how governments design social programs, all of it. We're going to build a really powerful toolkit for understanding choice, preferences, and utility.
So, welcome to our little study group for PP 5375. That's Economic Analysis for Public Policy and Management. We're going to be working through the readings from Section 05, which is all about choice, preferences, and utility, to really unpack the big ideas behind how and why people make the decisions they do.
So, let's just jump right in with a question. What in the world connects the price of Cheerios on a supermarket shelf, the way we evaluate food stamps, and how Ford designs a brand new car? I mean, they seem totally unrelated, right? But as you're about to see, they all depend on answering the exact same fundamental question. And that answer is the theory of consumer behavior. To really get a handle on it, we're going to be pulling directly from our key course materials, our main textbook, which is Pindyck and Rubenfeld's Microeconomics, and of course, our lecture notes. The goal here is to build this powerful model right from the ground up, piece by piece. Here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why we should even care about this stuff. Then, we're going to build the two key pieces of the puzzle, what people want and what they can actually afford. Then, we'll smash those two things together to see how a choice is actually made. And to wrap it all up, we'll take our new toolkit for a spin on a real-world policy problem. Sound good? All right. Section 1. Why bother studying consumer choice? I mean, come on, we all make choices every single day. It feels pretty automatic. Why do we need some fancy economic theory to explain something that just seems so intuitive? Well, because this theory gives us a really powerful and systematic way to understand this universal problem we all face. How do people with a limited amount of money decide what to buy to make themselves as happy as possible? It's really the engine that drives the whole idea of demand, which is, absolutely critical for everything from a business setting its prices to a government trying to design effective policy. Okay, so let's start building the first big piece of our model. How do economists actually represent what people want? In a formal way. This section is all about preferences. The whole theory really just rests on three pretty simple, common-sense ideas. First, we have completeness. This just means you can make a choice. If I offer you an apple or a banana, you can tell me which one you like better, or if you truly don't care. Second, transitivity. This means your choices are consistent. If you prefer apples over bananas, and you prefer bananas over cherries, then it follows that you've got to prefer apples over cherries. And third, more is better. This one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Having more of a good thing is always better. These three simple ideas are really the bedrock for everything else we're about to do. So now, we can actually visualize these preferences using this really clever tool called an indifference curve. The best way to think about this is like it's a contour map of happiness. Every single point along this curve represents a different mix of goods, say slices of pizza and movie tickets, that gives you the exact same level of satisfaction. Economists call this utility. You are literally indifferent between any of those combinations. Now, the slope of that curve at any given point tells us something super important. It reveals your personal trade-off rate. It's called the marginal rate of substitution, or MRS for short. What it really does is answer this question. How many slices of pizza are you willing to give up to get just one more movie ticket? And what's crucial here is that this has nothing to do with price yet. This is purely about your personal taste. And the shape of the curve tells us even more about your preferences. If you think two things are perfect substitutes, like, say, Coke and Pepsi for some people, you're willing to trade them at a constant rate. That creates a straight line indifference curve, like you see on the left. But if they're perfect complements, things like left shoes and right shoes, you need them together. Giving you 5 more left shoes doesn't help if you don't have a right one to go with it. And that creates that very distinct L shape you see on the right. Okay, so now we have a map of what people want. But, as the song goes, you can't always get what you want. And that brings us to the second super important part of our model, the reality of what people can actually afford. This is all about our budget constraints. We show this financial reality with something called the budget line. It's a really simple but powerful idea. It just shows all the possible combinations of two things you can buy if you spend every penny of your income. You can think of it as the frontier of what's possible for you. Anything on the line or inside of it is fair game. Anything outside of it is, for now, just a dream. And this budget line isn't static. It moves in very predictable ways. So look here. If your income goes up, your entire budget line just shifts outward, parallel to the old one. Simple, right? You can just afford more of everything. But if the price of just one of the goods changes, the line pivots. If a price drops, it pivots outward, opening up your choices. If a price goes up, it would pivot inward, shrinking them.
All right, this is it. This is the moment we've been building towards. We have our map of wants, those indifference curves, and we have our map of what's possible, the budget line. Now, it's time to put them together and find that single best optimal choice.
So what's the goal here? It's actually pretty simple. You want to climb up to the highest contour line of happiness, the highest indifference curve you can possibly get to without stepping outside of your budget. It's all about maximizing your satisfaction given the very real constraints you face.
And graphically, this optimal choice happens at a very special place. The exact spot where your indifference curve is tangent to your budget line. That's the single point where they just barely touch. That single point of tangency represents the one combination of goods that makes you the happiest, given the money you have to spend. And here is the big economic insight, the aha moment. At that optimal spot, the slope of your indifference curve is exactly equal to the slope of your budget line. Now, in plain English, what that means is the rate at which you are personally willing to trade one good for another, that's your MRS, is exactly equal to the rate that the market forces you to trade them through prices. Your personal value matches the market's price. It's a perfect little equilibrium. Okay, that was a lot of theory. Let's see this toolkit in action. We're going to apply everything we've just learned to a really concrete policy problem that mayors and city councils grapple with every single day. How to help low-income families with housing. So, imagine you're the mayor. You've got two main goals. You want to get families into more and better housing, and you also want to improve their overall quality of life. You have a limited budget, and you've got three policy tools on the table. A housing voucher that can only be spent on rent, an unrestricted cash grant of the same amount, or a price subsidy that makes housing cheaper for them. The big question is, which one do you choose? Well, our model shows us that each one of these options changes a family's budget constraint in a totally unique way. The cash grant, that's just like an income boost, so it causes a nice, simple parallel shift outward. The price subsidy, on the other hand, changes the relative price of housing, so it pivots the budget line. And the voucher is really interesting. It creates this kinked line, because that money has strings attached. It can only be used for housing, at least up to a certain point. So, these totally different budget lines are, of course, going to lead families to make totally different choices. And that brings us to our final section, the ultimate showdown, which reveals a really fundamental trade-off that's right at the heart of designing public policy.
And here's the bottom line. If the mayor's only goal is to get people to consume the maximum amount of housing possible, the price subsidy is the hands-down winner. It makes housing artificially cheap, and that creates a huge incentive to buy more of it. But, and this is the big but, if the goal is to maximize the family's overall well-being, to make them as happy as possible, the unrestricted cash grant is best. And why is that? Because it gives them the freedom and flexibility to reach their own highest possible indifference curve.
And this all leaves us with a really fascinating question that goes way beyond the clean logic of our model. Economic theory often tells us that when it comes to the recipient's welfare, cash is king. And yet, when you look around the real world, what do you see? You see policies like food stamps, housing vouchers, and energy subsidies absolutely everywhere. So why do policymakers so often choose these in-kind transfers and subsidies over just giving cash? Well, that's where economics bumps up against the messy world of politics, societal values, and maybe even the belief that sometimes policymakers think they know what's best for people. It's a fundamental trade-off every society has to deal with. Thanks for joining our study group today.